She thought her heart was a fortress, until his gaze became the battering ram. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Morgan, your guide through tales where love defies limits. Today's story, a scorching slow burn brimming with tension so thick you'll feel it in your bones. Imagine a world where control is currency and a single glance can unravel empires. We're diving into a romance that's quietly explosive, where every stolen moment crackles with the weight of secrets. If you crave love stories that simmer beneath the surface, where desire battles duty in the shadows, this is your anthem. Hit subscribe. It's time to lose yourself in a journey where hearts ignite, rules shatter, and true love writes its own destiny. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The elevator doors slid open with a hushed sigh, revealing the rarefied air of the Thorn penthouse foyer. Teyana Henry stepped out, the city's glittering skyline a distant diorama framed by floor-to-ceiling glass behind her. Her arrival was a study in contained power, the sharp lines of her tailored black dress, the impossible gleam of her patent Louboutins against the cool marble, the obsidian fall of her hair swept into a severe knot that accentuated the elegant arch of her neck and the sharp planes of her cheekbones. Her dark skin, flawless and luminous under the discreet recessed lighting, seemed to absorb the room's sterility and reflect back only cool command. The air here was scentless, temperature-controlled perfection, a physical manifestation of the order she demanded. Tonight, however, the order was disrupted. A man stood awkwardly before a vast abstract sculpture, fumbling with the knot of an ill-fitting silk tie. He was tall, lean, dressed in a suit that spoke of borrowed expense, good fabric, but cut for a different frame, lacking the effortless drape of true Thorn attire. Sunlight, even filtered through the tinted glass, had left faint traces on his skin, a warmth incongruous with the penthouse chill. His hair, a tousled mess of dark blonde waves, resisted any notion of control. He turned slightly, and Teyana froze. Liam Shaw, recognition slammed into her, a physical jolt beneath her ribs. The junior designer from the architecture division, the one whose raw talent her father Silas Thorn inexplicably championed, despite his perpetual state of near insolvency and a portfolio more suited to gritty urban murals than corporate skyscrapers. What was he doing here, in the sanctum sanctorum? Intrusion. Pure, unwelcome intrusion. He looked up, startled, his eyes a startling, turbulent gray, like storm clouds gathering over the sea, locking onto hers. For a split second, she saw naked apprehension flicker across his features, a vulnerability so stark it felt like a breach of security. Then, just as swiftly, a mask slid into place, polite deference, tinged with unease. He straightened, abandoning the tie. "Miss Henry," he murmured, his voice deeper than she remembered from brief clipped interactions on the 42nd floor. It held a rough texture, like unfinished wood. "Mr. Shaw," Teyana acknowledged, her own voice cool, measured, giving away nothing but frosty surprise. She didn't extend a hand. Her gaze swept over him, cataloguing the details, the faint scuff on one shoe, the slight tension in his shoulders beneath the expensive wool, the way his calloused fingers, an artist's hands, incongruous here, clenched briefly at his sides. He smelled faintly of turpentine and something else, rain, earth, an unsettling scent of life in this antiseptic space. An unexpected venue for a design review. Before he could formulate a response, a ripple of airy laughter preceded her half-sister's entrance. Celeste floated into the foyer, a vision in impractical ivory lace, her pale skin almost translucent, her expression one of perpetual, sheltered wonder. She beamed, oblivious to the crackling tension, and latched onto Liam's arm with possessive delight. "Teyana, you're here," Celeste chirped. Her eyes, wide and cornflower blue, darted between them. "Look, meet Liam, my husband." The word landed like a physical blow. The air vanished from Teyana's lungs. The cool marble beneath her feet seemed to tilt. "Husband." Her gaze snapped back to Liam. The mask was still there, but behind the storm-gray eyes, the shame she'd glimpsed earlier flared, hot and unmistakable, before being ruthlessly banked. He couldn't hold her stare, his jaw tightening as he looked down at Celeste with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Affection? Duty? Desperation? Teyana couldn't decipher it, only the profound wrongness of the picture. Silas Thorn materialized from the shadows near the dining room doorway, a predator savoring the trap. His smile was a blade wrapped in velvet. "Ah, Teyana," prompt as ever. "Yes, our little Celeste is a married woman now. Quite the whirlwind romance, wouldn't you say, Liam?" He clapped a heavy hand on Liam's shoulder, a gesture that looked supportive, but felt like the weight of a debt being settled. Liam flinched almost imperceptibly. "Yes, sir," he managed, his voice strained. Teyana forced her expression into impassive granite. Inside, chaos reigned. husband, married to Celeste, the untouched, naive daughter, the favored, sheltered child, and Liam Shaw, the talented, struggling artist from her own company. The pieces clicked with brutal, nauseating clarity. This wasn't romance. This was a transaction. Silas Thorne's signature move. Dinner was an exquisite torture. Crystal goblets caught the light, silver cutlery gleamed with cold precision, and conversation flowed like acid around perfectly plated, tasteless food. Silas held court, pontificating on market fluctuations, his gaze occasionally lingering on Liam with a chilling mix of possession and disdain. Celeste prattled about wedding plans, floral arrangements for the penthouse terrace. It's so drab, Liam, darling. You simply must work your magic, and the sheer romance of it all. Liam responded with monosyllables or carefully constructed platitudes, his eyes fixed on his plate or occasionally darting towards the city view, anywhere but Teyana. Teyana observed it all, her CEO facade firmly in place. She noted the way Liam's knuckles whitened around his wineglass stem when Silas made a veiled comment about ensuring stability for the newlyweds. She saw the forced relaxation of his shoulders when Celeste touched his arm, a micro-flinch disguised as a shift in posture. She smelled beneath the cloying scent of the hothouse orchid centerpiece and Celeste's expensive floral perfume, that persistent, unsettling trace of turpentine clinging to him, an artist's musk, out of place, intriguing, and Teyana. Silas turned his reptilian smile on her. I trust Liam's integration into the family won't cause any complications at Thorne Industries. He'll naturally remain in architecture under your purview, of course. It was a command disguised as a question, a reminder of her place in his empire. Of course, father, Teyana replied, her voice smooth as the marble tabletop. Mr. Shaw's work has shown promise. She allowed her gaze to flicker to Liam. He met it this time, a brief, charged connection. In his stormy eyes, she saw a flicker of defiance, quickly extinguished, and something else, a raw, unguarded vulnerability that resonated deep within her own carefully walled-off core. It was like seeing a reflection of a buried self she refused to acknowledge. She looked away first, the taste of her chardonnay suddenly metallic. Disgusting, this whole arrangement, him, her weakness in noticing. The sterile vastness of her corner office on the 60th floor of Thorne Tower usually felt like an extension of her own controlled being. Today, it felt like a cage. The city sprawled beneath her, a circuit board of ambition and indifference. Teyana stood at the window, her reflection a stark silhouette against the glass. The image of Liam Shaw in her father's penthouse, bound to Celeste, wouldn't leave her. The shame in his eyes, the incongruity of his worn spirit amidst Thorne opulence. It was a violation of the natural order she enforced. A knock shattered the silence. Miss Henry, Liam Shaw for the Adler Project review. You requested 10 minutes. Teyana didn't turn immediately. She took a slow breath, centering herself, rebuilding the ice. Send him in, Miranda. Liam entered, carrying rolled blueprints and a tablet. He looked different here, on her turf, more contained, yet the borrowed suit still didn't fit quite right. His storm-gray eyes scanned the room, taking in the minimalist severity, before settling on her with wary respect. Miss Henry, Mulder Mux, Mulder Mephishen, Mr. Shaw. She gestured to the conference table embedded in the glass wall. The Adler lobby redesign. Your preliminary concepts lacked cohesion. She kept her tone professional, distant, ruminatories. He unrolled the blueprints, large sheets smelling faintly of paper and ink. His fingers, long and capable, traced over lines. The client wanted impactful yet timeless, he explained, his voice low, focused. The initial concepts leaned too heavily towards the monumental. I've been exploring ways to integrate warmth, texture, a sense of arrival that doesn't overwhelm. He pointed to a new sketch, a cascade of suspended light-diffusing elements resembling petrified wood. Biomorphic forms, natural materials reinterpreted. It creates drama without coldness. She caught the scent again, turpentine, graphite, and something indefinably him. It was distracting. Warmth is subjective, Mr. Shaw. Thorne projects convey authority. She tapped a sharp nail near a curved wall element. This verges on organic indulgence. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, surprising her. Not deference, but challenge. Authority doesn't have to feel like a fist, Miss Henry. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one that invites you in. He met her gaze, holding it for a beat longer than professional courtesy dictated. A well-placed curve can be more disarming than a right angle. Her pulse gave a traitorous jump. Flirtation, or just an artist defending his vision. The subtle banter, the directness in his stormy eyes felt dangerous. She straightened, pulling her aura of icy control tighter around her. Disarming is rarely the corporate objective. Refine the concept. Less curve, more clarity. Focus on the Thorne brand signature. She turned back towards her desk, dismissing him. That will be all.
She felt his gaze linger on her back for a moment before he gathered his things. The silence after the door clicked shut was louder than before. The phantom scent of turpentine lingered in the air, a taunting reminder of the life that pulsed outside her meticulously constructed world. Silas insisted on their presence at the Thorn Industries annual gala. It was a grotesque display of wealth and power, a sea of diamonds and predatory smiles. Teyana navigated it like a warship, a vision in molten gold silk that hugged her statuesque frame, her dark skin glowing against the fabric. She exchanged razor-sharp pleasantries, her smile a calibrated weapon. Across the crowded ballroom she tracked Liam. He stood beside Celeste, who shimmered in pink tulle, chattering animatedly to a bored-looking socialite. Liam looked trapped, a wild creature in a gilded cage. His expression was polite, but his eyes held that familiar distance, scanning the room as if seeking an escape route. He held a champagne flute, the crystal looking fragile in his strong, calloused hand. Teyana watched as a particularly obsequious VP clapped him on the back, making some joke. Liam's knuckles went bone-white on the stem. She saw the slight tightening of his jaw, the forced curve of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. He looked beautiful in his torment. The thought shocked her, a spark igniting forbidden tinder. Later, seeking refuge near a towering ice sculpture already weeping in the overheated room, she found herself momentarily alone. Then, the scent of turpentine and rain cut through the cloying perfumes. Liam appeared at her side, refilling his water glass from a nearby crystal pitcher. The space between them crackled, charged with the unspoken tension of the penthouse, the office, and now this gilded circus. Quite the spectacle, he murmured, his gaze fixed on the melting ice swan, not looking at her. His voice was low, intimate in the surrounding din. Efficiency disguised as celebration, Teyana replied coolly, though her skin prickled at his proximity. Unnecessary evil. He finally turned his head, those storm-gray eyes capturing hers. A faint wry smile touched his lips. Evil seems a bit strong, though watching grown men compete over the size of their contributions to the silent auction does feel vaguely dystopian. A surprised, almost laugh threatened to escape Teyana. She suppressed it instantly, but her lips twitched. Philanthropy is competitive sport, a Thorn specialty. She took a deliberate sip of her mineral water, the cool liquid doing nothing to douse the sudden heat in her veins. His nearness was a physical thing, a magnetic pull she had to consciously resist. Your sister seems to be enjoying it, he observed, nodding towards Celeste, who was now twirling on the dance floor with an elderly tycoon. Celeste enjoys the idea of things, Teyana said, her voice colder than intended. She instantly regretted it. It felt like a betrayal, an opening. Liam's gaze sharpened, studying her face. He didn't defend Celeste, didn't offer platitudes. Instead, he said quietly, ideas are safer, less messy. He held her gaze for a long, potent moment. The noise of the gala faded. All she saw were the depths of his eyes, the weariness, the intelligence, the unspoken understanding of the cage they both inhabited, albeit in vastly different wings. He raised his water glass slightly towards her in a silent, ironic toast, before melting back into the crowd. Teyana stood rooted, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Less messy, the words echoed. His gaze had felt like an interrogation, seeing past the gold silk and the CEO title to the isolation beneath. It was unsettling, infuriating, and undeniably magnetic. She needed air, real air, not this recycled, perfume-saturated prison, driven by a compulsion she refused to name. Teyana found herself taking the private elevator to the penthouse's neglected rooftop garden days later. She rarely came here. It was a relic of her mother's brief, vibrant tenure before illness, and Silas's coldness had withered both her spirit and the plants. Now it was Silas's concession to Celeste's whims, a space deemed unimportant. Pushing open the heavy, seldom-used door, she was assaulted not by decay, but by life. Late afternoon sun, thick and golden, poured over the terrace. The air hummed, dense with the drone of bees and the intoxicating perfume of jasmine. It coiled around her, sweet and heady. Vines, thick and green, cascaded over crumbling stone planters she remembered as barren. Blooms erupted in unexpected bursts of color, vibrant geraniums, defiant lavender, and everywhere, the star-like white clusters of jasmine. And there, in the heart of this unexpected sanctuary, was Liam. He sat on a weathered stone bench, bathed in sunlight, a large sketchbook open on his knees. His jacket was discarded, sleeves of his simple white shirt rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with blonde hair. His head was bent in fierce concentration, charcoal pencil flying across the paper. He was utterly absorbed, lost in the act of creation. The controlled, uneasy man from the gala, the polite husband at dinner, was gone. Here was raw, unfiltered Liam. Intensity radiated from him, a palpable energy that seemed to vibrate in the sun-warmed air. His brow was furrowed, a lock of unruly hair falling across his forehead. His lips slightly parted in focus. He sketched with a passionate urgency, his movements fluid, assured, completely at home in this tamed wilderness. Teyana stood frozen in the doorway, hidden by a thick curtain of bougainvillea. The sight was a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs. This was the man beneath the debt, beneath the marriage, beneath the borrowed suit. This was the artist, the creator, the free spirit her father had caged. The vulnerability she'd glimpsed before was transformed here into a potent, captivating strength. The jasmine scent, the hum of bees, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the sheer aliveness of him. It was overwhelming. It was everything her sterile world was not. She watched, mesmerized, as his hand moved, capturing the wild spirit of the garden he'd clearly nurtured back from the brink. The tension in his shoulders was creative, not burdensome. A faint smile touched his lips as he shaded a dense cluster of leaves. He looked beautiful, not in the polished way of the gala attendees, but in a way that was elemental, real. The forbidden pull she'd been fighting since the foyer tightened its grip, a vine coiling around her resolve, threatening to strangle it. Panic, sharp and sudden, flared within her. This was dangerous. This was the erosion of everything she was. She couldn't be seen, couldn't acknowledge this yearning. Silently, heart hammering against her ribs, Teyana retreated, easing the door shut behind her. The cool, scentless air of the penthouse corridor hit her like a slap, but it was no refuge. The scent of jasmine clung to her clothes, her hair, a fragrant, insistent ghost. The image of Liam, lost in passionate creation under the golden sun, was seared onto her retinas. Back in her pristine apartment within the penthouse, she poured herself a measure of expensive bourbon, the burn doing little to settle her nerves. She walked to her immaculate dresser, its surface holding only a single, flawless piece of abstract art. As she placed her clutch down, something fluttered out, a small, crumpled piece of thick sketch paper dislodged from where she'd unconsciously tucked it, after finding it near the printer in the architecture department days ago. She smoothed it out. It was a sketch, not of buildings or biomorphic forms. It was her, not the CEO, not the icy heiress. It was Teyana Henry caught in a rare, unguarded moment. She recognized the angle. He must have seen her from the design floor balcony. She was looking out of her office window, her profile stark against the glass, one hand resting lightly on the frame. The lines were quick, sure, capturing not her power, but a profound, unexpected vulnerability. A loneliness in the set of her shoulders, a wistfulness in the line of her jaw, as she gazed at the distant city, her reflection a ghost in the glass. He'd seen it, he'd captured it. The intimacy of it was terrifying, a violation more profound than any physical touch. Teyana stared at the sketch, her fingers trembling slightly. The jasmine scent still haunted her. The memory of his focused intensity in the garden pulsed in her mind. The cool perfection of her apartment felt suddenly suffocating, a gilded cage of her own making. The ice was cracking, the control was slipping, and the storm in Liam Shaw's eyes was the only thing she could see.
Chapter 2. The scent of jasmine haunted Teyana Henry. It lingered in the folds of her tailored blazers, a ghostly whisper against the sterile perfume of her office. It clung to her hair long after she'd left the penthouse, a fragrant rebellion against the controlled, scentless air of her world. It was the scent of the rooftop garden, yes, but more potently, it was the scent of him, of sunlight on warm skin, of turpentine and graphite, of unrestrained creation. It was the scent of erosion, silently eating away at the foundations of her control. Silas Thorne, ever the puppeteer, orchestrated another family dinner. The cavernous dining room felt colder than usual, the crystal chandelier casting sharp, judgmental shadows. Teyana took her seat at the opposite end of the obsidian table from Liam, a deliberate buffer of gleaming wood and forced distance. Celeste, resplendent in pale yellow silk, chattered like a sparrow about the garden's transformation. "Liam's simply magic with it, isn't he, Teyana?" she enthused, oblivious to the tension coiling around the table like smoke. "Those dreadful weeds are gone. He found Mother's old jasmine, practically resurrected it, and the lavender. You must come up and smell it properly, sister. It's divine." Teyana speared a piece of asparagus with surgical precision. "I rarely have occasion to visit the terrace, Celeste." Her voice was polished marble. "My time is better spent managing the company that affords such horticultural pursuits." She didn't look at Liam, but felt the weight of his gaze across the table. It was a physical pressure, a silent challenge to her dismissal. "Oh, nonsense," Celeste waved a dismissive hand. "Everyone needs a little beauty, even you, Teyana." She turned her wide, innocent eyes on Liam. "Darling, tell Teyana about the climbing roses you're planning for the east wall, the ones that smell like heaven." Liam cleared his throat, setting down his fork. His storm-gray eyes met Teyana's for a fleeting electric second before sliding back to his plate. "They're bourbon roses, Celeste. Louise Odier, strong fragrance, repeat bloom." His voice was neutral, but Teyana heard the undercurrent, the artist discussing his medium, the passion banked but present. "They'll need strong support. The wind up there. Support can always be engineered, Mr. Shaw," Teyana interjected, her tone cool, her gaze fixed on her wine glass. "If the foundation is sound, unlike your marriage." The unspoken words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. She instantly regretted it. It was too personal, too revealing of the turmoil beneath her ice. Silas chuckled, a low rumbling sound that held no warmth. Indeed, foundations are everything. As Liam is learning, he speared Liam with a look that was pure possession. Security requires sturdy walls. Wouldn't you agree, son-in-law? Liam's knuckles whitened around his water glass. Yes, sir. The words were gritted out. He didn't look up. Teyana felt a surge of cold fury, not just at her father's manipulation, but at herself. That jab about foundations, it had been aimed at Liam's precarious position, yes, but it had also felt like a betrayal of the fragile, unspoken connection she sensed simmering between them, the shared understanding of being trapped in Silas Thorne's gilded cage, albeit in vastly different cells. She risked another glance. Liam's jaw was clenched, a muscle ticking in his temple. The vulnerability was back, raw and exposed. It called to something equally raw within her, a dangerous empathy she couldn't afford. The forced proximity continued. A Thorne Industries charity art auction, ostensibly Celeste's pet project, but micromanaged by Silas. Teyana, as CEO, had to make an appearance. She stood near a garish abstract piece Silas had insisted on acquiring, a monument to expensive bad taste, radiating disinterest. Liam, inevitably shadowing Celeste, was drawn into her orbit as Celeste flitted towards a cluster of socialites. He stood beside her, hands shoved deep into the pockets of trousers that still looked slightly too new, too borrowed. He surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on a small, exquisite landscape near the back, muted grays and greens, a quiet pool reflecting stormy skies. Teyana followed his gaze. Predictable, she murmured, more to herself than him, gesturing with her champagne flute towards the garish centerpiece. Size over substance, a Thorne specialty. Liam didn't look at her, but a ghost of a smile touched his lips. Sometimes, loud is the only way to get noticed in a crowded room. His voice was low, barely audible over the din. He nodded subtly towards the small landscape. Though I prefer the whispers, the ones that draw you in, make you lean closer, see the details hidden in the quiet. Her breath hitched. Was he talking about the painting? Or, she forced herself to look at him. He met her gaze then, those storm cloud eyes holding hers. The intensity was back, the same focus she'd witnessed in the garden, but now directed solely at her. It was a look that bypassed the CEO, the heiress, and went straight to the woman beneath. A look that saw the loneliness in the stolen sketch. Heat flooded her cheeks, a traitorous reaction she couldn't control. Whispers can be dangerous, Mr. Shaw, she countered, her voice slightly huskier than intended. She took a sip of champagne to cover it, especially in rooms full of people eager to misinterpret them. He held her gaze for a heartbeat longer, the air crackling between them. Maybe the danger is the point, Miss Henry, he said, his voice dropping even lower, intimate despite the crowd. Sometimes the quietest truths are the ones worth the risk. He gave the slightest nod towards the landscape. That painter understood storms, the beauty in the turbulence, the clarity after the chaos. Before she could formulate a response, Celeste swooped back, grabbing Liam's arm. Liam, Mrs. Davenport simply must hear about your plans for the conservatory. Come. She dragged him away, leaving Teyana standing alone, the echo of his words, danger, risk, beauty in the turbulence, vibrating in her bones, the taste of champagne suddenly sharp and electric on her tongue. The garden became a siren song. Teyana found herself ascending to the rooftop terrace at dawn, drawn by an addiction she refused to name. The city was still hushed, bathed in soft pearly light. The air, cool and fresh, carried the intensified perfume of jasmine and damp earth. Liam's presence was everywhere, in the neatly pruned roses, the thriving lavender bushes humming with early bees, the vibrant geraniums spilling from repainted pots. It was a living testament to his hands, his care, his defiance against the sterility below. She walked the gravel paths, her Louboutins crunching softly, a discordant note in the peaceful symphony. She traced the velvety petals of a deep red rose, the thorns a stark reminder of the perilous beauty she was courting. She breathed in the jasmine, letting the heady scent fill her lungs, trying to drown out the voice of reason screaming warnings. Here, surrounded by the life he nurtured, the image of him sketching with fierce abandon burned brighter. The memory of his stormy eyes seeing her felt more real. One rain-lashed Tuesday, the tension bled into the workplace. Liam was summoned to her office regarding the Adler project. The biomorphic lobby design had evolved under her directive, less curve, more clarity, but it had lost its soul. It was technically perfect, coldly imposing, Thorne authority incarnate. Liam stood before the large screen displaying the final renders, his expression carefully neutral, but Teyana saw the disappointment in the tightness around his eyes.
"It meets the revised specifications, Miss Henry," he stated, his voice flat. "Structural integrity is optimal. Material choices convey the desired permanence." Teyana studied the image. It was flawless and utterly lifeless. It looked like every other Thorn lobby, a monument to power, not a place of arrival. The memory of his initial concept, with its warmth and invitation, taunted her. The phantom scent of jasmine seemed to drift through the climate-controlled air. "Permanence can also feel like entombment, Mr. Shaw," she found herself saying, the words escaping before she could censor them. She gestured towards the screen. "Where is the
breath in this design?" Liam's head snapped up, surprise flickering in his grey eyes. He studied her for a long moment, as if reassessing. "The breath was deemed an unnecessary indulgence, Miss Henry," he replied, a subtle edge to his voice. "Per your directive, focus on clarity, on the brand signature." He paused, then added, almost daringly, "Unless the parameters have shifted." It was a challenge, a crack in the professional facade. Teyana held his gaze, the unspoken tension from the auction, from the garden, thickening the air between them. She thought of the curve he'd defended, the one that could be disarming. She thought of the storm in his eyes. "Perhaps permanence needs a counterpoint," she said slowly, choosing her words with deliberate care. "A suggestion of movement, of life, without compromising the structure." She walked closer to the screen, standing beside him. The space felt charged, intimate. She could smell the rain on his coat, the faint, ever-present hint of turpentine. A single, unexpected curve. In the right place. "Where would you put it, Mr. Shaw, if you were unconstrained?" His gaze locked onto hers, intense, searching. The air hummed. He stepped closer, his arm brushing hers as he reached towards the screen. A jolt of electricity shot through her at the contact. He pointed to a soaring, rigid column near the entrance. "Here," he said, his voice rough, a gentle arc inward, echoing the flow of people entering. Not weakness, direction, invitation. His finger traced an invisible curve in the air. It wouldn't compromise the strength. It would humanize it. He looked down at her, his stormy eyes holding hers. "Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't the fortress wall, Miss Henry. It's the open gate. The open gate." The words resonated deep within her, a dangerous echo of his earlier talk of whispers and risk. His proximity was overwhelming, the heat radiating from him, the intensity in his eyes, the scent of rain and man and creativity. It was a potent drug. She saw the pulse beating rapidly at the base of his throat. She wanted to trace that line with her finger. She took a sharp step back, breaking the spell. "An interesting theoretical exercise, Mr. Shaw," she said, her voice regaining its icy composure, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Implement it, subtly. Prove it doesn't compromise structural integrity. Report back." She turned abruptly towards her desk. A dismissal, that's all. Her own defenses felt paper-thin. The erosion deepened. Teyana started finding reasons to walk past the architecture department. She'd linger near the large windows overlooking the model workshop, ostensibly reviewing project timelines, but her gaze would inevitably seek Liam. She watched him argue passionately with a structural engineer over a load-bearing detail, his hands sketching shapes in the air, his eyes alight with conviction. She saw him patiently explain a complex design concept to an intern, his manner devoid of Silas's condescension. She saw the genuine respect in his colleague's eyes, a respect earned, not bought. One afternoon, she witnessed a different scene. Liam stood near the coffee station, his phone pressed to his ear. His posture was rigid, his face drained of color. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the despair etched onto his features, the way his free hand clenched into a white-knuckled fist. He looked utterly broken. He ended the call, leaning heavily against the counter, his head bowed. The raw vulnerability was back, 1,000 times worse than at the dinner table. It was a glimpse into the crushing weight of the debt, the marriage, the cage. Liu Fian acted on pure, unthinking instinct. She walked towards him. The usual chatter in the department hushed as she approached. Liam looked up, startled, hastily wiping a hand across his eyes. The sight of unshed tears glistening there sent a pang through her chest. "Mr. Shaw," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "The Adler revisions. My office. Now." It was a command, a lifeline thrown across the chasm of their unspoken reality. He followed her silently. Inside her office, the door closed, the world muffled. He stood before her desk, looking lost, the mask completely shattered. "Miss Henry, what happened?" The question was out before she could stop it, softer than she intended. Concern bled through the ice. He flinched,
then looked away, shame flooding his features. "My father," he rasped. "The nursing home, complications, more costs. Silas," he couldn't finish. The implication hung heavy. More debt, more chains. Teyana understood the arithmetic of Silas Thorne's cruelty. Her own father's face flashed in her mind, cold, calculating. The fury she'd felt at the gala resurfaced, white-hot and protective. She didn't think. She walked around her desk, stopping a few feet from him. The urge to touch him, to offer some tangible comfort, was a physical ache. She clenched her hands at her sides. "He won't always hold the ledger, Liam," she said, the use of his first name slipping out, a forbidden intimacy in the sterile office air. His head snapped up, his storm-grey eyes wide with shock, then a dawning desperate hope. He searched her face, looking for the CEO, finding something else, something fierce and unexpected. Teyana, her name on his lips was a shockwave. It sounded right, dangerous, necessary. Before either could say more, her intercom buzzed. "Miss Henry, your father is on line 1. The spell shattered. The professional mask slammed back into place on both their faces. Teyana gave a curt nod. "Draft a memo on the Adler curve feasibility. By end of day." Her voice was clipped back to business. "Yes, Miss Henry," Liam replied, his voice rough but composed. He turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Teyana alone with the echo of her name on his lips, and the phantom scent of rain and despair. The Adler curve suddenly felt like a metaphor for everything, a dangerous bending of the rules she lived by. That evening, driven by a compulsion stronger than reason, Teyana didn't go to her pristine apartment. She took a car downtown, giving the driver an address pulled from an employee file she had no business accessing. She stood across the street from a converted warehouse building, rain slicking the pavement. One window on the 3rd floor glowed warmly, a large uncurtained space revealing high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and canvases propped haphazardly everywhere. His studio. She watched from the shadows. She saw him moving inside, a silhouette against the light. He paced, ran a hand through his hair, stopped before a large canvas, gesturing emphatically. He was alone, in his element, unobserved. The raw energy, the frustration, the passion, it was visible even from this distance. It called to the part of her that felt suffocated by marble and money, the part that craved the storm. She didn't cross the street. She stood in the rain, letting it soak through her coat, watching the light in his window, the silhouette of the man who was eroding her world, brick by carefully controlled brick. The jasmine scent was gone, replaced by wet asphalt and city grime, but the pull was stronger than ever. The open gate beckoned, and she was standing on the threshold, terrified, exhilarated, unable to step back. The garden had been the beginning. This window into his raw, unfiltered world was the point of no return. The erosion was no longer silent. It was a roar in her blood.
Chapter 3. The Thorn Foundation Gala was a beast of crystal and hubris, its mirrored walls reflecting 1,000 glittering masks. Teyana Henry moved through the throng, a statue carved from midnight silk and cool disdain. Her dark skin absorbed the chandelier light, her posture radiating an impervious authority that parted the sea of sycophants and social climbers. She exchanged razor-edged pleasantries, her smile never reaching her obsidian eyes, which constantly scanned the opulent cage for a single disruptive presence. She found him near the towering ice sculpture, a swan this year, already weeping pathetic tears onto the marble floor. Liam stood beside Celeste, who shimmered in a cloud of blush tulle, chattering excitedly to a stone-faced dowager. He wore another borrowed suit, the fabric straining slightly across his shoulders, a subtle reminder of his ill-fitting place. He held a champagne flute, his posture stiff, his storm-grey eyes scanning the room with the trapped intensity of a predator sensing the bars. Teyana watched the subtle clench of his jaw as Celeste laughed too loudly, the way his knuckles whitened on the stem when a portly investor slapped his back with faux camaraderie. He looked unbearably beautiful in his discomfort, a raw nerve amidst the gilded numbness. The forbidden pull tightened, a vice around her ribs. Then Silas struck. He materialized at the center of a widening circle, his voice amplified by the sudden hush, dripping with paternalistic poison. "Ah, Liam, my boy, just the man," Silas boomed, his arm draping heavily over Liam's shoulders in a parody of affection. Liam froze, a rabbit in the headlights of Silas's reptilian smile. "We were just discussing the tremendous opportunity your marriage to our Celeste represents. A true rags-to-riches story, wouldn't you agree, gentlemen?" He addressed the circle of leering faces. From worrying about medical bills, Silas emphasized the words, letting them hang like a bad smell, to dining with senators. Quite the leap for a talented draftsman. The air turned glacial. Teyana saw the color drain from Liam's face, saw the tendons in his neck stand out like cables as he fought to keep his expression neutral. Humiliation, raw and searing, radiated from him. He looked down, focusing on the melting ice pooling near his shoe, a desperate anchor. Celeste, oblivious, beamed beside him, mistaking the attention for admiration. Silas leaned closer, his voice dropping to a carrying murmur laced with venomous honey. Of course, such security requires gratitude, absolute loyalty. One must remember the foundation of one's newfound comfort, the source of the roof over one's head, wouldn't you say, Liam? He squeezed Liam's shoulder, a gesture of ownership and threat. Liam flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible recoil, but Teyana saw it, saw the tremor run through him, saw the storm clouds in his eyes darken to hurricane fury, mixed with a crushing despair that mirrored the shame she'd witnessed in the foyer that first night. It wasn't just humiliation, it was the systematic destruction of a man's spirit, performed for an audience of vultures. Teyana's own composure cracked. A cold, protective fury, fiercer than any corporate battle rage, surged through her veins, molten and terrifying. It wasn't just disgust at her father, it was a primal urge to shield Liam, to shatter Silas's smug facade. Her fingers tightened around her own crystal flute, until her knuckles matched Liam's. The room narrowed to the tableau of Silas's cruelty, and Liam's crumbling dignity. As Silas moved on, basking in the uncomfortable silence he'd created, Liam extricated himself from Celeste with a murmured excuse Teyana couldn't hear. He walked away, not towards the crowd, but towards the wide French doors leading to a darkened terrace overlooking the city. His stride was rigid, every muscle taut with the effort of control. He didn't look back. The roar of the gala faded to a dull buzz as she followed, pushing through the doors into the cool, damp night air. The city sprawled below, a tapestry of indifferent lights. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the terrace tiles slick, the scent of wet stone and distant ozone sharp in her nostrils. Liam stood at the far railing, his back to her, shoulders hunched, head bowed. He braced his hands on the cold metal, his knuckles bone white. The posture screamed defeat, a profound weariness that seemed to bow his entire frame. She approached silently, her Louboutins clicking softly on the wet stone, the only sound besides the distant city hum and the frantic drumming of her own heart. The space between them crackled with the tension of the gala, the penthouse dinners, the charged encounters in her office and the garden. It was thick, suffocating, alive. She stopped a foot away, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him despite the night chill, to smell the lingering whiskey on his breath mixed with the rain and the faint, ever-present turpentine. The controlled CEO, the ice queen of Thorn Industries, was gone. In her place stood a woman trembling on the precipice. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her, but she felt his awareness, a physical vibration in the charged air. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Years of meticulously constructed walls, decades of enforced control, crumbled into dust. Reason, consequence, duty, they evaporated like the rain on the hot city streets below. Her hand lifted, seemingly of its own volition. Cool, trembling fingertips brushed against the rough texture of his evening stubble, tracing the damp track of a single tear on his cheek. He flinched violently, a startled animal, whipping his head around. His storm-gray eyes met hers, wide with shock, red-rimmed with unshed tears, and raw, unguarded pain. And beneath the pain, blazing brighter than the city lights, was a mirror of her own forbidden longing, a desperate, hungry recognition that stripped them both bare. No words, none were possible, none were needed. His hand shot up, covering hers where it rested against his cheek. His skin burned, his fingers pressed hers harder against his face, a silent plea, an anchor. His other hand slid around her waist, fingers splaying against the small of her back, pulling her into him with a force that stole her breath. She yielded, melting against the solid heat of his body, her own hand sliding from his cheek to tangle in the unruly silk of his hair at his nape. The kiss wasn't gentle, it wasn't tentative, it was a collision, a claiming, a desperate, starving communion. His mouth crashed down on hers, fierce and demanding. It tasted of salt tears, expensive whiskey, and the intoxicating jasmine from the rooftop garden, a sensory overload that drowned everything else. Her lips parted beneath his onslaught, a moan escaping her throat, swallowed instantly by his kiss. His arms locked around her, crushing her against him, one hand fisting in the delicate fabric of her dress at her back. Her own hands gripped his shoulders, then slid up to cradle his face, her thumbs tracing the hard line of his jaw. It was fire and lightning, the rough scrape of his stubble against her palm, the dizzying scent of him, rain, male sweat, whiskey, and that indefinable essence that was purely Liam, filling her lungs, the solid wall of his chest against hers, the frantic, synchronized hammering of their hearts against each other. The world ceased to exist.
There was only the heat of his mouth moving over hers, the desperate slide of tongues, the electric current arcing between every point of contact. It was free fall, terrifying and exhilarating, the dissolution of every boundary she'd ever erected. Decades of restraint dissolved in the searing heat of his touch. He broke the kiss first, gasping for air, his forehead resting against hers. His breath came in ragged bursts, warm against her lips. His eyes, still stormy but now blazing with a different kind of intensity, searched hers, panic warring with wonder, horror with dawning, irrevocable understanding. The silence returned, but it was different now, shattered, charged with the aftershocks of their collision. They sprang apart as if scalded, putting precious inches of rain-slicked stone between them. The cool night air rushed in, a shock against their flushed skin. The sounds of the gala, muffled laughter and clinking glasses, filtered through the doors, a jarring reminder of the world they'd momentarily obliterated. Panic flared in Liam's eyes, mirroring the terror clawing at Teyana's own throat. What had they done? The consequences loomed, monstrous and immediate. Without a word, they turned and fled the terrace, taking separate paths back into the glittering beast, leaving the scent of jasmine, salt, and shattered resolve hanging heavy in the damp air. The next days were a blur of excruciating tension and stolen, breathless moments. Teyana moved through her corporate world like an automaton, signing documents, issuing directives, her voice cool and steady. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. The sterile perfection of her office felt suffocating. The scentless air mocked her. She craved the jasmine, the rain, the turpentine, the scent of him. The air crackled, thick with unspoken memory. He stood close, deliberately invading the carefully measured personal space she demanded. His knuckles brushed against hers, as they both reached for the control panel. She didn't pull away. His storm-gray eyes held hers, dark and knowing, a silent question echoing the kiss. "Going down seems to be a recurring theme, Miss Henry," he murmured, his voice low and rough, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. The banter was back, but laced with a dangerous new intimacy. She arched an eyebrow, meeting his gaze, a flicker of challenge in her obsidian depths. "Perhaps some foundations require reassessment, Mr. Shaw. Unexpected stresses can reveal hidden weaknesses." Her voice was steady, but her pulse hammered against her ribs. The flirtation was a tightrope walk over an abyss. The elevator dinged, the doors opening on an empty floor. He didn't move. Sometimes the most resilient structures aren't the rigid ones. They're the ones that know how to bend. He held the door open with his hand, his body blocking her exit for a heartbeat longer than necessary, his heat radiating against her. Without breaking, she stepped past him, the brush of her arm against his chest, sending a fresh jolt through her. "Bending invites collapse, Miss Shaw." She tossed over her shoulder, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Control is paramount. She walked away, feeling his gaze burn into her back, knowing her retreat was a lie. She was already collapsing. The rooftop garden became their sanctuary, their secret cathedral. They met there at dawn, when the city was still hushed, painted in soft pinks and golds. The jasmine was intoxicating, the air alive with birdsong, and the hum of bees drawn to Liam's thriving lavender. Here, amidst the life he'd coaxed from stone, they shed their titles, their burdens, their cages. One such dawn, Teyana found him already there, sitting on the stone bench, sketching the first rays of sun, gilding a dew-kissed rose. He looked up as she approached, his eyes softening, the storm clouds momentarily stilled. She wore simple linen trousers and a silk camisole, her hair loose for once, a cascade of dark waves around her shoulders. She felt exposed, vulnerable, gloriously free. "You're early," she said, her voice husky with sleep and something else. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted, setting aside his sketchbook. He stood, closing the distance between them. His gaze traced the line of her neck, the curve of her shoulder, leaving a trail of heat. Kept thinking about structural integrity and unexpected curves. A blush warmed her cheeks. She reached out, tracing the charcoal smudge on his jawline from his sketching. "Messy work, creation. Essential work," he countered, capturing her hand, turning it over to press a kiss into her palm. The touch sent shivers down her spine. "Worth the chaos." He pulled her gently towards him, unlike gala swans. She laughed, a low, rich sound that surprised her. Or fathers playing puppet master. His expression sobered, the shadows returning. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "He's tightening the screws, Teyana. The nursing home calls the gratitude reminders." The fear was back in his eyes, mixed with a fierce protectiveness that mirrored her own. She leaned into his touch, the warmth of his hand a balm. "Let him play his games. We have ours." She rose onto her toes, her lips brushing his in a whisper of a kiss, a promise. "Stronger foundations." He groaned, low in his throat, and deepened the kiss, slow and deep this time, a counterpoint to the frantic hunger of the terrace. It was exploration, affirmation, a slow burn that threatened to consume them both. When they broke apart breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "This, us, it's madness. Necessary madness," she breathed, her fingers threading through his hair, The only thing that feels real. He pulled back slightly, his storm gray eyes searching hers, intense, serious. It's more than madness, Teyana. He didn't say it. He didn't need to. It was in the way he looked at her, the way his hand trembled slightly against her back, the way the garden seemed to hold its breath around them. He traced the curve of her lower lip with his thumb, his voice a rough whisper. You unravel me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The confession, unspoken yet deafening, hung in the jasmine-scented air. The world outside, Silas, Celeste, the debt, the gilded cage, pressed in, a looming threat. But here, in their stolen sanctuary, amidst the defiant blooms and the warmth of his body against hers, the only reality was the terrifying, transformative truth of their bond. The kiss on the terrace had shattered their resolve. This dawn in the garden was the beginning of the world they would build from the pieces, however perilous the foundation. The storm wasn't over, it was the air they breathed now, and they were standing defiantly in the eye of it, together.
Chapter 4. The garden had become a living, breathing entity. Jasmine vines clawed their way up trellises, defiant blooms shattering the sterility of the thorn penthouse's shadow. Teyana stood at the edge of the rooftop, her fingers brushing dew-kissed petals, their scent a visceral reminder of the man now weaving through the chaos of her world. Below, the city pulsed, a hungry, relentless thing, but here, in their sanctuary, time bent. It had been 3 weeks since the terrace kiss, and the aftershocks still reverberated through her like tremors. Liam found her there, as he always did, at the liminal hour between night and dawn. His footsteps were silent on the gravel path, but she felt him. The air shifted, charged with the heat of his presence. He wore a paint-splattered shirt, the collar damp from a rain shower that had passed hours ago. His storm-gray eyes tracked her, hungry, possessive, tender. "You're late," she murmured, not turning. "Your father's lawyers," he said by way of explanation, stopping behind her. His voice was rough, edged with exhaustion, another reminder. Teyana stiffened. The unspoken words hung between them. Debt, control, cage. She turned, meeting his gaze. The vulnerability there undid her. He looked exhausted, shadows bruising the skin beneath his eyes, but his hands, those capable, calloused hands, reached for her with a certainty that defied the chaos. His fingers tangled in her hair, cradling her skull as he leaned in, his breath warm against her lips. "I almost called security when you weren't here at midnight," he whispered, a ghost of a smile touching his mouth. "Would have been a poor strategic move," she countered, her voice low. "I control the security feeds." His laugh was a quiet rumble. "Ah, but you forget, I married into this family. I've learned to bend the rules." His thumb brushed her lower lip, and the intimacy of the gesture, the raw, unguarded want in his eyes, made her breath catch. The banter was a shield, fragile and familiar, against the storm gathering on their horizon. The art studio downtown was a cathedral of chaos. Canvases leaned against walls, splattered with bold strokes of ochre and midnight blue. The air smelled of turpentine and rebellion. Teyana had never been here before, but she'd imagined it, had pieced it together from stolen glances at his sketches, the smudges of charcoal on his fingertips, the way he'd once described color as a language louder than boardroom bullshit. She arrived unannounced, drawn by a restlessness she couldn't name. The door was unlocked. She stepped inside, her heels echoing on the concrete floor. Liam stood with his back to her, shirtless, jeans slung low on his hips, his body arched over a massive canvas. The muscles of his back rippled as he painted, swift, violent strokes that mirrored the tempest in his eyes when he finally turned. "Teyana," he said, freezing. The brush slipped from his hand, clattering against the floor. Paint splattered his feet. She drank him in, the smudges of cobalt on his collarbone, the sweat-dampened curls clinging to his forehead, the wild, unfiltered life of him. It was a different kind of power than hers, not controlled, not calculated, a force of nature. "You weren't at the garden," she said, her voice steady despite the riot in her chest. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands framing her face. "I needed to finish this," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "It's for you." The canvas loomed behind him, a storm rendered in oil, swirling grays and golds, a lone figure standing at the eye of it, face turned toward the light. Her, unmistakably her. The vulnerability of the sketch he'd once drawn of her was gone, replaced by something fiercer, a warrior in the tempest. "You see me," she whispered. "I see you," he agreed, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Not the CEO, not Silas's daughter. You." The kiss was slow, deliberate, acclaiming. His mouth moved against hers with the same fervor he'd poured into the painting, his hands sliding down her spine to pull her flush against him. She tasted turpentine and mint, felt the hard planes of his chest against her palms. The studio faded, the city, the debt, the gilded cage, all of it drowned in the heat of his touch. Silas Thorne's eyes were cold as he nodded toward Liam, standing at the back of the room beside Celeste. "Your husband has been quite the asset, Celeste," he announced, his voice dripping with malice, though one wonders if his loyalty to this family extends beyond his talent for arrangements. The room stilled. Teyana rose, her chair scraping sharply against the marble floor. "Are you questioning Mr. Shaw's integrity, father?" she asked, her voice slicing through the silence. Silas's smile was a blade. "I'm questioning the wisdom of allowing a man with such flexible morals near this family's legacy." Liam moved, then stepping forward. "With all due respect, sir." "Due respect," Silas barked. "You'll address me as enough." Teyana's command cracked like a whip. Every head turned. She stood at the head of the table, her dark eyes blazing, her posture unyielding. Liam's redesign of the Adler lobby increased its valuation by 14%. "His morals have served this company far better than your transactions." The word hung, sharp and accusatory. Celeste gasped. The shareholders murmured. Silas's face purpled. "You dare, I dare everything." Teyana interrupted, her voice iron. "You wanted a strong Thorne heir. You have one. But this," she gestured between Liam and Celeste, "this arrangement ends." Now, the room erupted. Liam stared at her, storm-gray eyes wide with shock, pride, something fiercer, love. It was there, unspoken but radiant. The fallout was swift. Silas cut Liam off. No more nursing home payments, no more access to Thorne funds. Celeste dissolved into tears, torn between the husband she'd adored and the father she feared. Teyana moved through it all like a queen on a battlefield, her armor dented but unbroken. She funneled resources to Liam's father, circumventing Silas's blockades. She bought out his debt, quietly, ruthlessly. They met at the garden that night. Liam arrived first, pacing beneath the jasmine, his hands fisted in his hair. When she stepped onto the path, he turned, and the raw gratitude in his eyes nearly undid her. "You shouldn't have," he began. "I did," she cut in, closing the distance. Her hand cupped his jaw, feeling the tension there. "He's using you as a pawn. I refuse to let him win." Liam caught her wrist, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And what about us?" he asked, his voice rough. "Are we pawns too?" She stepped closer, her other hand sliding around his neck. "No," she whispered. "We're the storm." His hands gripped her hips, lifting her onto the stone bench. She wrapped her legs around him, the thin fabric of her dress, no barrier against the heat of his skin. The garden thrived around them, blooms unfurling in the darkness, as if the earth itself celebrated their rebellion. "When lost she?" The penthouse was silent when they returned. Celeste had fled to one of the estates, Silas to his club. They moved through the empty halls like ghosts, hands brushing, breath sinking. In her bedroom, cool, minimalist, all sharp angles and muted tones, Liam hesitated. "Teyana," he said, a question and a plea. She stepped into him, undoing the buttons of his shirt with deliberate slowness. "No more rules," she murmured, pushing the fabric aside to press her palm over his heart. "No more cages." He kissed her then, gently, as if she might shatter, but she didn't. She burned. Morning came too soon. They lay entwined, sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting their skin in gold. Liam traced the curve of her shoulder, his touch reverent. "What now?" he asked. She turned to face him, her fingers brushing the stubble on his jaw. "Now," she said, "we build something new." Outside, the city awoke, a beast of steel and ambition. But here, in the wreckage of the old world, something bloomed, wild, unyielding. Theirs,